All right, there we go. Welcome to the Myrna Method live stream. I'm registered dietitian Myrna Haag. My goal is to bring you nutrition information that can significantly improve your life. In this video, we're going to talk about caffeine. If I have to think about one ingredient that universally we all take, no matter if you're on a paleo diet, vegan diet, one ingredient we can all pretty much bank on, common denominator, is caffeine. It's in a lot of supplements. Most people can't even survive without their first cup of coffee in the morning. So in this video, we're going to talk about at what level is caffeine, draw the line between being helpful or being harmful. So Sam, if you're ready, let's take it down. All right, caffeine, boost or burnout. And that's pretty much how you have to think of it. Because with caffeine, there is definitely a benefit and a harm based on the amount, time of day. So let's talk about the biochemistry of caffeine and get right into the hairy Larry of this. So with caffeine in the liver, it breaks down into 3 compounds. The one we're going to focus on, which is mostly 90%, 94%, is paraxanthine. This is a compound that the liver produces once it demethylates. That's just a chemical compound that the liver goes through in breaking down caffeine. And this compound that the liver breaks down attaches to a receptor site in the brain. This androgen receptor site in the brain is meant for another compound, and we're going to talk about where that compound comes from, but the caffeine compound, the paraxanthine, attaches to the androgen receptor, and this is what creates this alertness. Now, what's supposed to be attaching to it is adenosine. So adenosine, some of you may recognize from adenosine triphosphate, which is ATP. And this is made in the mitochondria. And this is just doggone energy we need all day long, every day. So the body produces energy, which we're going to talk about next, where this energy comes from, why the body produces it. And these little compounds that the body produces naturally attaches to these receptor sites. But caffeine is already there. So these little compounds that are produced by the mitochondria is what creates sleepiness, restfulness. These receptor sites, when this adenosine attaches to it, makes us want to have sleep, makes us sleepy. So let's talk about how this works in the mitochondria, because I think this is also super important, because a lot of times people don't understand that your body has normal rhythms of circadian for sleep and wake that are dictated by some of your hormones, but also what goes on with your body's burning of energy can also be implicated in your sleep cycle. So the mitochondria is the little powerhouse in all our cells, and the mitochondria takes mostly glucose and fat simultaneously, sometimes a little more of one than the other, depending on your activity, with oxygen, and it produces this adenotriphosphate, which for short we call ATP. And this ATP is what circulates throughout the body. That is the energy. So you're getting it from food, and the body's producing it in the mitochondria. So the more energy you produce, let's say you're super active, you've had a great day outdoors, you've exercised, you've been to the gym, you're going to have a lot of ATP producing. And when that ATP produces, it has a byproduct, the androgen, and this androgen byproduct builds up in the blood. After a full day of activity, you're going to have a heck of a lot more than somebody who's sitting at their computer, who's not very active. They're not going to have a lot of ATP, right? They're not going to have a lot of action of mitochondria because they're just not active. Well, this is what triggers the sleepiness. This is what actually goes to the brain, because by the time it's 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the evening, you have built up, especially if you've been active, a lot of ATP, you have built up a lot of androgen. And this is what attaches to these receptor sites in the brain and signals the brain it's time for restful sleep. So when we're looking at caffeine blocking this receptor site from being able to interact with this adenosine, right? It creates more of an alertness. So when we're looking at the fuel burning side of things, the increases of the ATP, this is going to be when you're going to get the excess, I won't say even excess, I'll just say a buildup of adenosine in the blood that actually creates the feelings of restfulness. It also increases serotonin and dopamine. Those are the pleasurable feelings. It creates more of a homeostasis in your mood. So the more activity, the more ATP, and actually the more mood enhancing, which could explain why we always feel better after a workout and we sleep better. Right? We always say, well, we're more tired, so it must be a muscle thing. Well, now you know it's actually chemically related. The actual mitochondria releasing more ATP build up in the blood that creates this restful, sleepy feeling by the end of the day. Now, if you're doing a lot of fuel storing, let's say you're actually getting heavier or you're not active, you're gaining weight, then you're going to have low ATP, low response in the brain receptor sites, less restful sleep, and this is also associated with more weight gain, obviously, right? More body fat. Also, I want to mention with the higher ATP, it actually helps create more body fat burning. I mean, forget about the fact you eat more than you burn. The actual increase in the mitochondria, the actual mitochondria, the fact that you're using them a lot, increases your metabolism. I've talked about this in other podcasts as well, that it all is about the muscle. Most of the mitochondria are in the muscle. So I always say, hey, your metabolism is in the muscle, but really your metabolism is all about the mitochondria. So how caffeine affects that, let's look at the bigger picture. Is you drink a cup of caffeine or drop a cup of coffee, and the coffee blocks the adenosine receptors, which normally trigger the I'm tired signal. Now remember, you're going to be a lot more tired at 8 o'clock in the evening because you're going to have more buildup than you will at 8 o'clock in the morning. This can also signal the nervous system. Because when the nervous system, and that's going to have to do with the adrenal glands, you're going to hit the hypothalamus, the pituitary, there's this little axis in the brain. But at the end of the day, it hits the adrenal glands, which triggers more cortisol. And this is where we get the fight or flight. This is what I call the tired and wired syndrome. Because at some point, if you keep blocking all these receptors, your body wants to signal you to sleep. It wants to signal you to be restful, but it's not able to. So you're actually tired, but you're wired. And you're in the alert syndrome, you're on the alert mode, but you have a body that has a lot of chemicals that would like to tell you to be more restful. But the downside of this, at a certain point, and we're going to talk about how many cups of coffee, at what level do we create more of this fight or flight when the cortisol gets released. And you also know that I frequently talk about how a lot of these stress hormones, particularly cortisol, epinephrine, these hormones trigger the liver to release more sugar. When the liver releases more sugar in the blood, you have more insulin. You can also have a problem with diabetes. So coffee, a certain amount can help with weight loss, but a certain amount actually can trigger weight gain. So what's the magic amount? Everything I've looked at in studies, 200 milligrams, which is about 2 cups of coffee, 200 to 300 milligrams, we can actually get a benefit. You're going to feel more alert within the first 1 to 3 hours, 1 to 2 hours, really. And you're going to have a very low effect after the 3 or 4 hours, so it weans down, and you're going to have minimal crash. And because it's not going to hit the adrenal glands when you're looking at 2 or 3 cups, the same as when you're doing on the next sheet I show you, the 4 milligrams, the 4 cups. So you start getting to 4 cups of coffee, that's 24 ounces or greater. Bottom line, the biggest thing with caffeine, is the most alert you're going to be. And I'm going to show you a little graph, that shows you how it relates in timeline. But the most alert you're going to be is when the first 1 or 2 hours, the first hit of your 12 to 20 ounces is when you're getting the best benefit energy-wise without the crash. Because after you get a certain amount of coffee, then you get this crash where these other hormones start playing in the picture, and then you're not really going to get the big energy hit you would expect. So I think this graph really explains it well. In this graph, I show in the yellow line, this is where you have 1 to 2 cups, and you're showing that after the blue line, 6 cups, you get a very minimal amount of increase in energy, not that much. But what happens with the 4 to 6 cups is you get a real deep dive in the crash. And this is where we're going to get a lot of the cortisol releasing, and you get the jitteriness feeling. And this is the tired and wired. You really want to sleep, or your body wants you to sleep, but you can't because you're more wired. So it's what I call tired wired. And also what can happen is you get a headache. And the unfortunate part about this is that caffeine can actually help with headaches. So you get the headache from the crash, and the best thing that fixes the headache is what? More caffeine. So you have another cup of coffee and you get a little hit. But the problem is when you're really sitting at this low crash, even when you go for your second cup of coffee or third cup of coffee, after you've had, the 24 ounces, you're just not going to get the same rise in energy as you did in the first 12 to 16 ounces in the morning. That's where you're getting the best hit in energy and actually the most benefit. We'll talk about some health benefits. But after that, it's diminishing returns. So the first 1 to 3 cups of coffee can actually help with weight loss, help with alertness. After that, it can actually increase weight, increase body fat because of all these stress hormones that are being released into the body from the liver, releasing sugar that increases the insulin, actually can increase the appetite and lipogenesis, where you become more about fat storing than you do fat burning. So when we're looking at how much coffee and distinguishing between the 2 to 3 cups and the 4 cups and the difference in the benefits, it's really all about the crash. Too much creates a real drop. So let's go through the chain reaction. So caffeine blocks the adenosine receptors, which normally the adenosine builds up during the day because the mitochondria is releasing it. And this tells your brain to be restful or sleep. Caffeine blocks these receptors and leaves you with a signal of go, go, go. So the tired signal does not get to the brain like it should. This also interprets a higher alert, which can trigger the adrenal glands to release more stress hormones, more cortisol, creating a fight or flight. That's where you're going to get the jitteriness, and you're really not going to get the benefit. That first 12 to 16 ounces in the morning is really where you get the best benefit. So when I talk about the difference in crashes, we're going to also talk about how to minimize the crash. Because let's suppose you are drinking a lot of caffeine, and we'll come back to this, but what I have found as a dietitian with caffeine, especially in coffee, you can minimize some of the crash by bringing in a little bit of protein. So I know with my mocha in the morning, I make sure for every 8 ounces, and I tell my patients this, bring in a minimum of 8 grams of protein, because that will take the buzz off of the sugar. If you do get a little bit of hit off of some of these stress hormones, you get relieved, and even a small amount may be a good thing, right? Motivates you, can actually increase your mood. That little bit of protein can take the edge off the crash. So the only controversy that I've heard with coffee, and it's really what I call the coffee paradox, is does coffee damage the endothelial cells? Those are the linings of the artery. And I do get a lot of mixed controversial studies. Some say it actually helps. Some say too much is bad. But what I have pretty much come to the conclusion from reading all the different studies is that if you keep it down to the 200 milligram, I really don't see too much controversy with caffeine. It's when you start getting above that is that's when you start seeing some of the studies show a detriment. So let's get into the difference of harmful versus beneficial. Harmful, over 400 milligrams, over their 4 cups. Increases blood sugar, palpitations, arrhythmias. So if you have AFib, probably not a good idea. It decreases endothelial function. That's the artery wall. Anything over 4 cups, we are seeing some of that. Increases cortisol, increases blood sugar. This increases your risk for diabetes because anytime you have cortisol raging, you're going to have the liver responding because the liver will dump sugar in the blood. Because remember, the body thinks it's fight or flight, so the liver's doing its job by throwing sugar in the blood so you can get ready to run from the lion, because that's what the body's thinking. Also, it can increase adrenal fatigue. You get the tired and wired because after 4 cups, you keep hitting those adrenal glands. Remember, not a big increase in energy, more of an increase in jitters. The caffeine crash can also induce addiction. It increases headache and it decreases your mood. Once you get in that crash mode, you're irritable, you're not really much fun to be with. It also can cause medication reduction in effects for thyroid, antidepressants, ADHD, and dementia. Also, I've seen studies, unfiltered coffee can slightly increase the LDL cholesterol. So they're talking about at least filter it if you're going to be drinking over 4 cups. But now let's talk about the benefits. And this is the 2 to 3 cups. It can actually serve as a pain reliever. It increases vasoconstriction. This is where you get a relief in headaches. It increases alertness, motivation. It actually helps with dopamine levels and it increases your mood. It improves endothelial function at a small amount. I've seen studies that show that. And also, a lot of teas and coffee can have some positive polyphenols, especially in the teas, the green teas. They can serve as antioxidants and anti-inflammatories. But if you're drinking 6 cups of tea, it isn't going to work out well for you because you're going to counter any benefit you're getting from the polyphenols from the caffeine and the crash. Studies support that modest levels can actually decrease appetite and improve weight loss. But don't forget, on the flip side, too much caffeine can actually increase your appetite and cause more weight gain because of all those other hormones that get triggered from the release of the cortisol. What I thought was really interesting too, and Sam pointed this out, is that now Starbucks, and I know you're a big Starbucks fan, Starbucks offers protein boosted milk. And they're giving for also an upgrade. Now you can do the poor man version. I just bring my little protein powder with me when I go to Starbucks and just stir it in my coffee. So if you're doing a 6-ounce cup of coffee at Starbucks, that's going to be about 15 grams from your favorite protein powder added to that cup of coffee. And that actually helps level any blood sugar issues. And forget about putting all the sugar in the coffee because remember, if you're getting sugar from the coffee because you're dumping all that other stuff in there, that's going to be a big problem, especially if you're doing more than 4 cups, right? It's going to cause a lot of issues in blood sugar, insulin, and cause really more weight gain. But I thought it was interesting because Starbucks offers a milk that's boosted, that's going to give you anywhere from 27 to 36 grams of additional protein. Or you can get the foam protein. I guess they offer foam with protein.
Foam on top of the coffee.
Oh, the foam on top. And that has 15 grams of protein. So you can ask for the foam for 15 grams of protein or ask for the real protein at 27.
Yeah. So if you wanted just a regular latte and add foam, then you get the 15 grams.
Perfect.
Or you don't get the foam and you just do...
And really, if you're doing a 6 ounce, isn't 6 ounce the normal size you get? Is that the medium? right? So the 16 ounce, you do the foam and you're all set. That's about 15 grams of protein. And I think a lot of my patients tell me that since they started really adding a little bit of protein, and by the way, when you think about it, an 8-ounce glass of milk with a little bit of espresso, that 8-ounce milk is about 7 to 8 grams of protein. So it does sort of take the edge off the crash. But I think it's interesting that now Starbucks offers that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very cool.
You can add a bit more.
So, in summary, 2 cups of coffee, probably a good thing. Increases alert, can increase your mood. If you're going to do it, I would say do it before 12 in the morning. I think the best way to drink your latte, if you're looking for the most energy, is to drink 1 cup, and then maybe an hour later, doing this before noon, you drink your second cup, because 1 cup of latte, 100 milligrams, that's going to give you energy for at least 1 to 2 hours. So if you space it out, you could literally get an energy from 1 to 4 hours, which would work great. It's not going to interfere with the adenosine because it's going to build up by 8 o'clock at night. So it really shouldn't affect your sleepfulness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the best way to do the coffee. I also would hit it up with a little protein.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get a little crash, and really 2 cups of coffee, you may get no crash at all. But I know that if you bring the protein with it, you're going to really have zero, right? I mean, You've been doing that, Sam, and you've said it's made a huge difference for you, right?
Yeah, adding the protein powder.
Right.
I do feel
she does the poor man version. Right. Okay, awesome. So I think we covered it. What do you think?
Yeah.
We did it?
You have a chat question.
Okay, perfect.
All right, give me just a second. Okay, right here. Give me just a second.
All right. I let Sam do all the IT. Oh.
Do you see it? There's one from Wendy.
I was wondering if you knew how caffeine affects ADHD. That would probably be a really good podcast to do also. But what I have seen is it actually has the opposite effect. It creates more of a calming, right? So, yeah, so that would be something, Sam, we should probably do is talk about the biochemistry of that.
Dive into it.
Yeah, because I think because it does affect different people differently with that. It has to do with the neurotransmitters in the brain and how. So I think that's what we should do. I think we should have one on caffeine with ADHD.
Okay.
But typically what it does, it creates more of a calming effect than more of the jitters. But regardless, it's still at a certain point, you're going to still get into the crash and burn. Okay. So, but I'll do some research and find out where that line is when it comes to ADHD and where, I'm going to assume it's probably going to be about the 4 cups because you're still going to get the release of the stress hormones. Even if you have ADHD at a certain point, you're still going to get the same effect where you're going to have that crash and burn. Starbucks is pretty neat to add that menu. I know. I thought that was pretty cool too. What about dehydration and the amount of water to have when or before or after to counter the diuretic effect of caffeine? Yeah, that's a really good point. So caffeine is a diuretic, right? So you know it because you drink a cup of coffee and like an hour later, you know what happens, right? So I would say that the amount of water, I know that for the amount of water most people need, it's going to be based on their body weight, okay? So if you weigh more, you need more water. And I think we'll bring, I don't have the formula for that, but it's on average going to be anywhere from 8 to 10 cups of 8 ounces for the average person, 8 to 10.
So there's one more comment, kind of.
I've had 2 cups of water to 1 cup of coffee.
That's what they've heard.
I don't really know for sure. I'll check that out. 2 cups of water for 1. So coffee has water in itself. But I'll look at that. The other thing with hydration, and I think if you're at 2 cups, I don't think there'll be much for dehydration. But if we're on the topic of dehydration, I'm going to go there. A lot of times when you're on a lot of these low-carb diets, you can deplete carbs from your muscles, right? Because you're on a low-carb diet.
So you're dehydrated
from a cellular level, yeah. So even if you're drinking a lot of coffee, and you're on a low carb diet and you're not getting glycogen in the muscle, right? Because I always talk about carbs are needed as part of a balanced diet. And so carbo means fuel, hydrate means water, carbohydrates. So when you bring carbohydrates into your diet and you allow your muscles to bring in this glycogen to allow carbs to be part of your diet, you actually increase hydration at a cellular level. When you take the carbs out of your diet, you can actually reduce water. So that's why a lot of people, they go on a low carb diet, we see that they lose a lot of water weight. Carbohydrates. So if you're on a low carb diet, which I think,
but I can't just drink a bunch of water, like, 'cause
well,
I think that's what they're saying. If coffee's dehydrating me, regardless of the carbs that I have,
so
if I just drink more water, I should be more hydrated.
I will look exactly, because I don't want to talk unless I know exactly the amount. How much can caffeine actually dehydrate you, ounces wise? And I think that it probably has to do a little bit with body weight too. So I don't know the exact number on that.
Exact line.
I don't know the number on it. I'm going to go look it up.
Okay.
But I can tell you this, since we're on the topic of hydration, which is where I'm coming from, one of the biggest hydrators, I mean, if somebody's worried about trying to get 2 cups of water, because I'm drinking a caffeine drink, the big elephant in the room is, even if you're doing that, and you are on a really low carb diet or a keto diet, your muscles are depleted of glycogen, meaning your muscles aren't storing carbs. For every gram of sugar that's stored in a muscle, we have 3 grams of water stored with it. So you can be drinking all the water you want and you're still dehydrated because the body isn't being able to keep it, right? It's not absorbing it at a cellular level.
I don't think a lot of people think of carbs and hydration.
Right. And it's why they're called carbo, fuel, hydrates. And a lot of people have problems with carbs because they have insulin resistance and they don't understand when you eat a carbohydrate, you got to balance it with fiber and protein. That's what gets it into the muscle like it should. Otherwise, if you eat a lot of sugar, yeah, you're going to have a problem.
And you have a lot of other streams that show
all the time. I'm big on balance. The point is, if you're on a really low carb diet and you're drinking a lot of coffee, you're going to be truly more dehydrated than somebody that is not doing that. But let's say you're on a low carb diet and you don't drink any caffeine, you're going to be dehydrated because that's the chemistry that happens when we don't include carbs in our diet, right? But next week I'm having the intern on and we're doing a really great case study. Bailey's back. I mentor interns that are studying to be RDs and we do case studies together. And next week we're going to have a really good stream on one of our case studies. And I think you guys are going to love it. It's going to talk about weight loss, weight gain, bariatric surgery, working with the patient. So we're not going to do the follow-up, but let's do it the week after, Sammy. Okay. And I'll go check, remind me, and I'll check on the exact water. We'll get the hydration thing, and let's do ADHD and caffeine. Sure. I think that's a good one.
That sounds good. You just have little comments, but no other major question.
Yeah. Complex carbs are best with fiber. Right on, baby. You got it. So eat carbs with your coffee. Well, if you eat carbs with your coffee, you're going to have to balance it with protein. There you go. You could do a meal with your coffee.
I think some people do for breakfast.
Yeah. Don't eat carbs by themselves. Unless you're exercising, then do it because then it'll help fuel the muscle. You want to bring in a little protein and a little fiber. That's why they're called net carbs, because they're bringing in that fiber to really mitigate. That's what net carbs are about. When you see 0 net carbs, there's no such thing, by the way. So when it says net carbs and they're making it sound like it doesn't have any carbs, that is just not so true. It has carbs. But when you bring the fiber in with those carbs, it mitigates it. Yeah. It changes the whole chemistry of the equation. Okay? Yeah. And that's the best way to get the carbs, actually. All right. I think we're good. All right. Awesome. Oh, don't forget to like and subscribe. I did that on my own. Can you believe it? Remember me? And we should do the plug for the book. Yeah. Why Your Diets Fail. And the science really works because that's what it's all about. Know how to eat so you can be your leanest and your really best,
Yeah.
healthiest. All right. Till next time.
Till next time.
Sounds good.